Now when we talk about the transportation of gases, right? Transportation of gases, we know that blood is the major transporting fluid of our body, right? And blood is the medium for the gaseous exchange of the oxygen and the carbon dioxide, right? So 97% oxygen is transported by the RBCs, right? 3% oxygen is transported through the plasma. Clear? 20 to 25% is transported through of carbon dioxide, right? Is transported through the RBCs. 70% in the form of bicarbonates. And 7% through plasma, and 7% through plasma. Clear? So as we know that the transportation of oxygen, 97% transportation of oxygen is through the RBCs, and in RBCs we know that the hemoglobin is present, right? In RBCs, hemoglobin is present, right? Which is responsible for the gaseous exchange. Actually, oxygen can bind with the hemoglobin in a reversible manner, right? Hemoglobin is iron containing cytochrome respiratory pigment, right? It is iron containing cytochrome respiratory pigment, and we know that each hemoglobin molecule can carry maximum 4 molecules of the oxygen, right? The partial pressure binding of oxygen, or we can say per gram hemoglobin can carry the, or we can say the oxygen binding capacity is 1.34 ml per gram of hemoglobin, right? So binding of oxygen with the hemoglobin is primarily related to the partial pressure of the oxygen, right? And other factors are also which affects the partial pressure of the oxygen, or binding with the oxygen with, that is the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide, and ion concentration, 2-3 dpg, temperature, right? All these interfere this binding. Clear? On the basis of that, now it's very important from the examination point of view, we will discuss about the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve, right? Oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. As its name suggests, oxygen hemoglobin dissociation, that means the dissociation of oxygen from the hemoglobin, right? What will happen in that case? Actually, this is the relationship between the saturation of the hemoglobin and the oxygen concentration, right? And it is studied with plotted a graph, right, of oxygen and hemoglobin dissociation. If all the conditions are normal, that means what? See here, as I say that 1 gram of hemoglobin can carry 1.34 ml of oxygen, and on an average 15 gram of hemoglobin per 100 ml of blood, right? So how much amount of oxygen carried by the 15 gram of hemoglobin? It is approximately 20 ml, right? And in that 20 ml, just in 20 ml, 5 ml oxygen released at the level of tissue, right? 5 ml oxygen released at the level of tissue, clear? And rest of the 15 ml stored in the muscles for the at the time of strenuous exercises, right? It is stored in the in muscles for these strenuous exercises. So if all these conditions are normal, and this is so, the graph of oxygen hemoglobin dissociation graph or curve is normal, that is sigmoid. It is sigmoid, clear? See, as we know that this is the partial pressure of oxygen in mm of Hg, that is oxygen hemoglobin saturation. Right? And 0, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 and 100, right? Same as that here, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 and 100. If all the conditions are normal, then what will happen? The curve is sigmoid, right? The curve is the right, the curve is sigmoid, right? That is sigmoid, that is the S shaped. We can say this is S shaped, clear? Now what will happen? If all the conditions are normal, then that curve is sigmoid curve, right? But if there is change at the level of tissue, right? At the level of tissue, if the partial pressure of oxygen get reduced, then what will happen? That curve slightly shifted towards the right side, right? That curve slightly shifted towards the right side. So what will happen? Why that condition occurs? In tissues, right? In tissues, at the level of tissues, partial pressure of oxygen is reduced when the affinity of hemoglobin is reduced towards the oxygen. That means partial pressure is reduced, right? pH is also reduced. Why pH is reduced? Because H ion concentration increases here, right, against the partial pressure of oxygen. So partial pressure of carbon dioxide is also increases, right? H ion concentration increases, temperature increases here, right? 2,3-DPG diphosphoglyceride, it is also increases here. So what will happen in that stage? In NCRT, one line is marked in the tissues level where PO2 is low, pH is low, H ion is high, PCO2 is high, temperature is high, right? Then that is the favorable condition for the dissociation of hemoglobin from the oxygen, right? That is the favorable condition. That means here, what will happen here? Dissociation of oxygen from oxyhemoglobin, right? Why? Because here partial pressure is reduced. So to compensate that partial pressure, to maintain that partial pressure, right, oxyhemoglobin dissociate the with the oxygen, and oxygen released at the level of tissues, right? And now what will happen if, so that curve is shifted towards the right side. So that curve is shifted towards the right side, right? And what will happen if the curve is shifted towards when it shifted towards the left side? So many questions asked with that part, so listen carefully, right? In alveoli, right, in alveoli, when the partial pressure of, because we inhale the air, so that's why at that time the alveolar air carries the maximum amount of the oxygen, right? So partial pressure of oxygen is more here and pH is more here. Why? Because the H ion concentration is decreases here, right? The partial pressure of carbon dioxide is also decreased, right? The temperature decreased, 2,3-DPG decreased, right? So in that case, what will happen in alveoli, that is the favorable condition for the formation of the oxyhemoglobin, right? Now in here, the oxygen get combines with the hemoglobin, right? This is the here formation of oxyhemoglobin, right? Here formation of oxyhemoglobin. In NCRT it is mentioned that, right, that in alveoli, when the partial pressure of oxygen increases, Pa and H ion decreases, partial pressure carbon dioxide decreases, temperature and 2,3 dPg decreases, then this is the most favorable condition for the formation of the oxyhemoglobin. So this is the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve, right? This is the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. Same as that, the fetal and maternal hemoglobin dissociation curve is reciprocal to each other, right? That means if when the partial pressure, when the mother's oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve is towards the right side, then the fetal oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve is at left side, right? They are opposite to each other. So this is all about the oxyhemoglobin dissociation curve. Now, when we talk about the transportation of the carbon dioxide, we know that the carbon dioxide is carried by the hemoglobin in the form of carbaminohemoglobin, right? When carbon dioxide gets combined with the hemoglobin, then it forms the carbaminohemoglobin. Clear? Carbaminohemoglobin. What will happen now? We know that through the RBCs only 20 to 25%, through the RBCs only 20 to 25% of carbon dioxide is transported, right? Only 20 to 25% carbon dioxide is transported through the RBC. So what will happen? This affects the partial pressure of the oxygen, right? This affects the partial pressure of the oxygen, or we can say its binding is related with the partial pressure of the oxygen. Partial pressure of oxygen, that is PO2, is the major factor which affects the PCO2, right? We already studied in that if the partial pressure of carbon dioxide increases, right, then what will happen? Partial pressure of oxygen decreases. In alveoli, partial pressure of carbon dioxide decreases, then the partial pressure of oxygen increases, right? Now if the partial pressure of carbon dioxide decreases in abnormal amount, right, then what will happen? We have to maintain that level, right? We have to maintain that level. So in our body, listen carefully, we know that in RBC a higher concentration of an enzyme is present, which is known as the carbonic anhydrase, right? Carbonic anhydrase enzyme is present in RBCs as well as the plasma, and it is the fastest enzyme of our body. It is the fastest enzyme of our body. Actually, what will happen after the aerobic respiration, right, when the final products is the carbon dioxide and the water, so with the help of, because our body expel the carbon dioxide in a particular amount, it is a little amount, and it is totally based on the pressure gradient, right? That is the pressure difference between the atmospheric air and the intrapulmonary pressure, right? So the whole, if we want to the expel out whole carbon dioxide outside of the body, so it's not possible. And if carbon dioxide is present in our body as it is formed in its real form, then what will happen? We know that the affinity of carbon dioxide is 20 to 25 times more than that of the oxygen. So what will happen? A hemoglobin firstly preferred to combine with the carbon dioxide and form the carbamino hemoglobin, right? And it causes the suffocation. So it create problem. It disbalance our body fluids concentration, or the concentration gradient or osmotic gradients of the body fluids, right? So what will happen now? The carbon dioxide and water in presence of carbonic anhydrase enzyme, they are converted into the carbonic acid, that is H2CO3, right? Again, that carbonic anhydrase acts upon that carbonic acid, and it splits into to form the HCO3, which bicarbonates and H ion, right? Which we say that the sodium bicarbonate or the bicarbonates are the basic buffers of the our body fluids. So to maintain that level, there is necessary to perform this process. Clear? Now what will happen? Why these arrows are like that? Because it is the reversible reaction, right? In presence of carbonic anhydrase, both they are combine and split and form the bicarbonate and H ion. Now what will happen? When the carbon dioxide concentration level is reduced in our blood, right? So to maintain it, and if it's not there is absence of aerobic respiration, right? So what will happen? How we will maintain the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide? Then again, in presence of carbonic anhydrase enzyme, that bicarbonate and H ion again combine to form the carbonic acid, and again that's in presence of Ca, that carbonic acid splits into the carbon dioxide and water. That carbon dioxide gets mixed with the blood and maintain the partial pressure, and that water stored is used in the metabolic activities, right? So in that manner, that transportation of carbon dioxide occur, and the carbon dioxide that's why we can say the 70% carbon dioxide is transported through the in the form of the bicarbonate ions, right? Every 100 ml of deoxygenated blood release 4 ml of carbon dioxide to the alveoli, at the alveoli, right, to expel out. Clear? So this is all about the transportation of gases, the oxygen and the carbon dioxide. It's very important part, right? Number of questions are asked through that portion. Now there are some effects like the Bohr's effect, the Halden's effect or the Hamburger's effect, but the most important for you, the chloride shift, right? And which is that chloride shift is also known as the Hamburger's phenomenon, right? What is that Hamburger's phenomenon? Actually, to maintain the electrostatic neutrality, right, of the blood, It's the transfer of bicarbonate ions into the plasma, and chloride ions enter into the RBCs at the level of the tissues, which is called the internal respiration. This is called the chloride shift. Right? Now come to the carbon monoxide poisoning. We know that carbon monoxide poisoning, that is the affinity of hemoglobin is 200 to 250 times more than the oxygen, right? And when carbon monoxide gets combined with the hemoglobin, it forms the carboxyhemoglobin, which is a stable compound, and it is a poisonous gas, right? Carbon monoxide is a poisonous gas, so it creates some problems, right? Like the dyspnea, difficulty in breathing, suffocation, right? All these things. And when in sound sleep, if we inhale it in maximum amount, that it will be the cause of the death of the person, right? So that's why the carbon monoxide is also known as the silent killer, because patient himself, he don't know about that, he will be die, right? Clear? So there are many reasons of the carbon monoxide poisoning, like the motor vehicle exhaustions, like the heaters, engine fumes, right? All these things. Now come to the regulation of respiration. When we talk about the regulation of respiration, respiratory mechanism is controlled by the CNS actually, right? We will talk about the regulation of respiration. We know that the respiratory mechanism is controlled by the CNS, that is central nervous system, right? Which is the combined activity of the brain and the spinal cord. Respiratory movements is under the control of the center of medulla oblongata, right? Respiratory movement, I am talking about the respiratory movement, right? These respiratory movements under the control of centers which are present in the medulla oblongata, right? The respiratory centers, the basic rhythm of the ventilation is controlled by the respiratory center which is present in the brainstem, right? That is the combination of the midbrain and pons and the medulla. Clear? That respiratory center is composed of the medullary rhythmicity area, which is present in the medulla oblongata, right? Pneumotaxic center and apneustic center, which is present in the pons. Clear? Medulla oblongata carries the rhythmicity area, that is rhythm center, right? And pons carries the pneumotaxic area and the apneustic area, right? Pneumotaxic area and the apneustic area, right? And when we talk about the medullary respiratory center, there are two centers, that is the DRG and the VRG, that is dorsal respiratory group, which is also known as the inspiratory group, and VRG, that is ventral respiratory group, right? That is related with the exhalation, or we can say it is called the expiratory center, right? So now what will happen? That pneumotaxic center is also known as the pontine center, right? And it is located in the upper part of the pons. Actually, it controls, or we can say it inhibits the, it sends the inhibitory impulses to the inspiratory center, right? After taking a deep breath, take a deep breath. more and more? No, we are not able to take more breath, right? Because at our pneumotaxic center sets our limit, right? So we cannot inhale more air. If it is, then it may rupture or it damage our internal system, right? If it occurs, but it's not occurs because it totally under control of the brain, right? So pneumotaxic center, right, and apneustic center is located in the lower parts of the bone, and it coordinates, it coordinates between the inspiratory center and the expiratory center, right? And the next one is, which is very important from the examination point of view, another one is the chemotaxic, right? That is the chemotaxic area. What is that chemotaxic sensitive area? Yeah, we can say the chemosensitive area. The exact name is the chemosensitive area, right? The exact name is the chemosensitive area. What does it mean? Chemosensitive, that is sensitive towards the chemical. If there is any change in the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide and H ion concentration, because H ion is related with the pH, right? And pH is related with the chemical activity, right? So that area respond immediately against the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide and H ion concentration, right? And the question asked through that portion, it is situated in, that chemosensitive area is present in which area, in which part? So it is situated close to the respiratory center in the medulla, right? It is close to the respiratory center in the medulla. It is highly sensitive to change in the partial pressure of the carbon dioxide and H ion concentration, right? So this is all about the regulation of respiration. There are some medical terminologies, that is the as we discuss about the dyspnea, right? Same as that, the hypoxia, right? What is that hypoxia? That is decreased concentration of oxygen, right? Apnea, that is absence of breathing. So these are the question of pre-medical. Now come to the diseases which are also given in the NCERT. First one is the bronchitis, right? First one is the bronchitis. Split that word, bronchitis. Itis, that is inflammation. So inflammation of the bronchi, which is caused by some irritants such as the gases, different kinds of the gases which comes through the air pollution, right? Due to some infections, and the cigarette smokes, right? So that causes the bronchitis, right? That is the inflammation of the bronchi. Second one is the asthma. Second one is the asthma. What is the asthma? It is the difficulty in breathing and causing a wheezing sound like that, due to the inflammation of the bronchi and the bronchioles, right? Next one is the emphysema. All these are the question of pre-medical, right? What is the emphysema? That is due to the damage of alveoli, the respiratory surfaces decreases, right? The respiratory surfaces decreases, and that disorders is called the emphysema. Actually, it reduces the breathing capacity. Clear? And the last one is the occupational respiratory disorders. That means it is related with the occupation. When the person works in the some industries like the coal mines or the asbestos industries, right? The stone industries, where the stones and all these, when they gets break off, then the crystals are spread through around in the air, right? And when the person inhale it, then it affects the internal surface, right? So simply These kind of diseases which are related with the occupation are called the occupational respiratory disorders, right? So in that way the summary of breathing and exchange of gases is completed. Now we will discuss some questions from the NCERT, how we will solve these problems, right? And the question asked from the NCERT, right?